G'day YouTube, this is Necroarcanist XIII in association with BANDIT1569, bringing you next chapter in Book 1 Necroarcanist Hell's Crusade. If you have not yet watched chapters 1 through 8, then do so now to avoid spoilers. Previously on Hell's Crusade, after returning home, John interviews his recruits Brian, Luke, Stan, and Jack with the powers of nature, lightning, sangomancy, blood magic, and technology, respectively. However, Ethan quits because for some reason he did not receive any powers. So the Necrocrusaders Sin Invitarum begin their epic rebellion, targeting Mountain Heights Disciplinary Institute. The enemy forces prove to be no match for the magic-wielding warriors, and after a quick heated battle, the rebels proceed to phase 2 of their first mission. This is Hell's Crusade, Chapter 9, Hunter of the Dark. The Necros hurried towards the front doors, allowing Vincent to kick them down. Then they began marching into the school main corridor. "I have a bit of a concern here," said Adele. "What if anybody tries to attack us out of fear or desperation, like civilians?" "Non-lethal incapacitation," replied John stoically. A sharp blow to the side of the head can knock Vincent out if it hits the right nerve. "Alright then." As the group marched down the corridors throughout the school, they kept passing windows to classrooms. Whenever students tried to see what was going on, a combination of a cane cracking and children screaming could be heard, piercing even Raziel's heart. "We've got to end this," said Adele. "I can't stand sensing people suffering this way." "Some things you can't help," replied John. "I know that better than anyone, working as a mercenary. Think I don't mind hearing people cry out for a miraculous salvation as they're being bled to death? I actually hate it, but I just keep a straight face, focus on my objective. A few seconds of concentration, Adele, can mean the difference between life and death. Even though you don't like it, I still take you with me when shit like this happens. Try and teach not to let your morals show your weakness. Out there, harsh war-torn battlefields, dodging a flak and shrapnel, nothing but a knife and 3 bullets on me, no gun. If I stopped and stared at the corpses thinking about how horrible it was, instead of taking out the sniper making those corpses, I'd be joining them. Just have to keep a straight face, try to ignore it, don't let it undermine your courage, fight through the pain. After almost half my life fighting, you've let it get to you," commented Raziel. "The sights of war can scar your mind for eternity. In a world where the people are forsaken by those who should be protecting them, divine or moral entity regardless, you have no choice but to fight to survive." "Well, yeah boy, that's why I've been training you kids to defend yourselves all this time. In case I make a mistake that cost me my life, I won't have left you helpless like the rest of the kids here. That's why I kept you all together, so you can watch each other's backs like families should. Were the situation less dire, I would happily give peaceful protest to avoid the bloodshed, but it's degraded too far, so we're gonna have to kick the door down here. We'll have to send people to the graveyard when they so much as lay a hand on us. Even if our intentions are pure, this violence is only going to cause more violence. In the end, we may leave this godforsaken hell and become a normal functioning society, but with the number of people we will have killed, we'll leave without souls. I wish you 4 kids never had to go through with this. I wish none of us has seen what we have, but everything I've done to make this possible, it's just because I'm desperate to make sure we all have a shining future. I have to take a stand. And our chances." The group suddenly reached the end of the corridor, and as they were about to turn the corner, Luke suddenly stopped them. "Wait," he said, "I just had a thought. We haven't come across many elites yet, have we?" "So?" asked John. "Well, while I was in the slammer, I overheard a lot of them guards talking about how they set up unit formations inside of strongholds. And you're telling us this now? Nigga, for a place this big there should be at least 10 elites walking around, and we've only killed 2. I bet the other 8 are waiting for us right round that corner." John positioned his scythe just around the corner, using the reflection in the blade as a mirror. Sure enough, there were a large group of elites, seemingly protecting the warden's office. "Well, fair friggin' go," exclaimed John. "Problem is, the only spells I got that can wipe them all out at once will level the entire building section, including us. We're gonna need another plan." Adele suddenly jumped into the view of the elites and started taunting them. "Hey metalheads, come get it!" The instant the elites noticed Adele, she ran as far away from the Necros as she could with the soldiers in pursuit. They were so focused on catching her that they didn't even notice the Necros, who were standing close enough to be in their peripheral vision. Well, I got that. Hate to say it, Dante, commented Luke. Girl's got more balls than you. John began waving his scythe around. Bob, Fang, we'll go interrogate the warden. Rest of you go help Adele. The group went their separate ways. John led Luke and Saberfang to the warden's office. Luke tried to kick the door down, but he bounced off with hilarious results. Saberfang then reached up and turned the handle, allowing quick access. John charged in ahead, ready to blaze guns, but he was shocked to find that there were no living entities in the room, apart from several pet goldfish that were dying of starvation and neglect. The sick bastard or crazy bitch sure liked to watch things suffer, commented Saberfang. You don't seem confident about the warden being a bloke, replied John. Well, the natural stereotype is of course an overweight sadistic fat cat who cares more about their own well-being than Dante cares about himself. And that is a hell of a lot of self-obsessed vanity. But, on the percentage chance it is a woman in charge, as somebody with Luke's stereotypical nature would say so, bitches be crazy. She'd have to be one crazy bitch to want to work in such an establishment as this. Luke finally stood up and entered the room. You know, for a talking dog, you sure know a lot about human culture, he said. Well, I watch a lot of TV when nobody's home, replied Saberfang. Besides, werewolf culture is actually not that different from humans. However, there's one major difference, and that's our usage of the word bitch. In your culture, it's an insult, but where I come from, it's a polite greeting. That's why you get the slutty kinds of women who don't mind being called, as you would say, a fine-ass bitch. Well, if bitch ain't a negative term in the wolf world, then what is? Well, most derogatory words humans use toward canines, mutt, feral, mongrel's the biggest one of all. Call a werewolf, especially one of high standing like an alpha couple's pup, a mongrel would be like, well, social werewolf to human equivalent. I'm only going to say this as an example, don't mean anything negative, but it will be calling you a nigger as an insult. Luke began cracking his knuckles. You're the first white boy who called me a nigger and got away with it, so congrats. John interrupted the social understanding. Can you two help me out here? I'm trying to figure out where the hell this bastard slash bitch might be. Sorry, said the pair in unison. Is it just me or is it drafty in here? Asked Saberfang. John and Luke both looked at each other and shook their heads. Thought not. Humans aren't so equipped in the sense department. Saberfang began to sniff around the floor. You are quite smart though, Fang, said Luke. You should be like, the ambassador of your people or some shit like that. Well, I was the representative of my tribe. I usually went around to the other tribes and picked up any news worth mentioning and reported it back to the Alphas. So the Alphas are your version of King and Queens, I take it. Yeah, pretty much. I was an Alpha myself, you know. Kind of an ironic view. My father was a tough but fair warlord, member of the Council of Seven. They took care of the countrywide matters such as trespassing humans, outbreaks of rabies, civil war, that kind of stuff. And I? His eldest son who enjoyed poetry and literature. My sister Teresa was a far better soldier than I am, so she was the captain of the guard. Well, I never knew you had a sister, Fang, said John. There's much of my life you do not know, but by life expectancy comparisons, I may still be an infant, but I'm already in my late hundreds. No wonder you look so old, said Luke. Well, that's just how we look, said Saberfang. We men normally have shaggier hair. The thicker your hair, the manlier you're supposed to be. If you saw my father, it'd be like if Vincent, with his abnormal muscular tone, died and was reborn as a dog. Women's hair is sleeker and softer, like a feather-down quilt. Their physical beauty is based on how shiny their coat is. Luke suddenly stared at John. Why the fuck is it that whenever we get together we talk about some weird-ass topic like this? I'm surprised at how we're talking about how to classify werewolves as sexy. I understand that, said John. It's like having an interspecies foreign exchange student living with us and telling us about their culture. Then again, I'm open to a little foreign experience. Tried an Asian meal once. Wasn't that bad despite the fact it looked like someone shot out their nose. Luke began laughing. If it was Japanese, it probably was. Then again, with the current famine, who can blame them for getting creative with their meals? Saberfang suddenly interrupted the two. I found something, he said. He suddenly began digging at the floor, and eventually he came across a metal plate that he could not scratch through. Can you give me a hand here, Luke? Luke swung his axe with great force, cleaving the table and the plate in two. John then cleared his throat to gain the pair's attention. Then he turned to a fake light switch on the wall. He flicked it, and the floor opened up to reveal a hidden passageway with a spiral staircase leading down. "Well, that looks pretty deep," commented Luke. "I can smell blood and death," added Saberfang. John then opened a window. "We best get the others before we go down. I've got no idea what's going to be down there, and I reckon it'd be better if we were all together." John jumped out of the window, shortly followed by Luke and Saberfang. Meanwhile, Adele was running for her life from the elites. Heavily exhausted from running, she had no choice but to stop and hide. She made sure that nobody could see her, then she ducked behind a low section of brick wall. She waited just long enough to get her breath back, then Adele looked over the low wall to gain her bearings. She saw nobody and decided it was safe to move. "If I can just get back to the guys," she thought. "The hell was I thinking doing this alone?" She ran around the corner, trying to trace her steps back, but suddenly a 7-foot-tall elite was standing in her path, glaring down at her. Terrified, she took a few steps back, only to run into another elite, who grabbed her by the arms to restrain her. Luckily, her slender frame allowed her to slip out of the elite's grip and escape, only to run into the other 6, who cornered her against a wall. To prevent escape, the 6 elites had combat knives pointed out, nearly touching her neck, and one of the elites, who seemed to be the leader because his armour was more noble compared to the others, in terms of both style and substance, walked up to Adele, who could do nothing but tremble as she stared down the barrel and laser sight of a sniper rifle aimed directly at her forehead. Time seemed to slow as the elite chambered a bullet. Although Adele was not sure whether it was just her subconscious mind trying to save a life like Brian's life or death scenario, or the fearful tension was building up to critical mass. "Just another waste of a perfectly potential subject," said the elite. The only other elite standing idle turned around and happened to notice something in the distance. "Hey, what's that?" he asked. Suddenly, a burst of black energy fell from the skies and detonated in a burst of light, temporarily blinding everybody. Before the guards could react, Raziel came flying through the air and snatched Adele as the sniper bullet was fired. Adele escaped unharmed, but the bullet managed to pass through a bone in Raziel's wing. The instant he touched the ground, he accidentally dropped Adele as he stumbled over. Upon examination, Adele could see that Raziel had been badly injured beforehand. His clothes were torn and his entire body was bruised or bleeding. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Are you okay?" asked Raziel in return. "That's all that matters." "All that matters," whispered Adele to herself. "You're injured. I doubt even I can heal this." Raziel tried to stand up, but he fell backwards and had to sit up instead. Adele then knelt down in front of him and tried to cure his wounds. "Just a pack of feral mutts," said Raziel. "I couldn't outrun them, but they got me a lot worse than I got them." "Yeah, I'm the only survivor of that battle, ironically." Adele began to panic as she was unable to cure Raziel's wounds, and he was beginning to bleed out. "Where are the others?" she asked. "Dadfang and Bob went to confront the person in charge here. The rest of us are out looking for you." "How did you find me?" "I just had this feeling. I always had it. I think I was born with the ability to sense emotions felt by others when they're in a dreadful situation. Dad says that, being an identical twin, I'm supposed to share this ability with Dante, but he doesn't have it at all, and I can sense anybody's emotion. Do you remember the day Dante fell over in the backyard and split his head open? Yeah, actually, I think that's what caused him to start acting the way he does now, all selfish and that. You know, I had no idea what was happening at the time, but Dad was teaching me how to do long division inside. Suddenly I had this powerful surge of pain rushing through my body, and I passed out. But according to what Dad told me afterwards, I was clutching my head, screaming for the burning to stop. And it wasn't long after you and Vincent came running and started screaming about Dante. A similar thing happened when Vincent was hit by a drunk driver, and it felt like my leg was broken when Vincent's actually was. I was just running alongside the two when all of a sudden I felt anxious and paranoid. I felt like a bright light was being shined into my eyes and I had the urge to run in a completely different direction. I saw you about to get shot. And when you saved me, you were the one who was shot, replied Adele. Raziel examined a broken part of his wing. It's not too bad, he said. I can still fly, I think. I just feel dizzy. It's not even a pain though, it's just related to... A regular soldier suddenly jumped out waving his gun around, startling the pair. Freeze! Put your hands in the air, he shouted. Raziel sat still, his eyes dilating at the pupils. In a burst of anger, Raziel pulled down his scarf to reveal that his mouth was wide open, and his canine teeth had grown to the length of an industrial-grade iron nail. The soldier was frightened and opened fire, making large holes in Raziel's wings, but little else as he was lifted up into the air. Adele could not see in the sunlight clearly, but judging from the splatter hitting the ground around her, and the movement and noises made, Raziel had taken a large bite out of the guard's neck to rip apart half the shoulder and ribcage in one fell swoop. Raziel then dropped the man to the ground, making even more mess upon impact. More soldiers appeared, frightened beyond human comprehension at the sight of their fallen comrade, and pointed their guns at Adele. She was clearly the only one in the vicinity to have killed him. Raziel then swooped back down and carried Adele back to another safe spot, this time landing on the roof. Adele immediately wrenched herself free upon landing, and she stepped back in fear as she watched a crazed Raziel lick the blood from his fingers. His entire face stained a deep vermilion, and his hair was messed up to the point where his demonic eye was in full view, almost wide with a sense of pleasure fulfilled. He then immediately broke out of his demonic bloodlust and hastily wiped the blood from his face and fixed his hair, but he forgot to fix his scarf. His fangs retracted back to normal size, but they were still long enough that even with his mouth closed, the tips protruded over his bottom lip. Seemingly ashamed of his actions, Raziel turned his back to a still shocked Adele. "Oh, Jesus, I'm sorry, shouldn't have done that. Try to keep myself controlled." Raziel grasped his upper right arm and felt the cracked bone forming a lump in his skin, trying to push it back down. Seeing as Adele failed to respond to him, he turned around to face her, but she just stepped back further away as he hung his head and tried to continue the conversation. "I just can't help it at times," he said. "It seems like I'm just desperate to protect everybody near me. I've heard Dad's tales of woe so many times, hearing about the many friends and family members and different ways they were killed, fighting a war to protect their families, fighting diseases nobody cared to find a cure for, executed the government because they were like me, foolishly and desperately focused on their struggles that they cared not what they did or who they wound up hurting, till it was too late to find any form of atonement except through death. And even then, it brought nothing except more pain for a family losing one more member, more suffering to the children who now had no parents to feed them. Then they became thieves who scavenged, lie and cheat a blazing streak as they too tried to survive until they're caught, and they follow in their parents' footsteps. Shortly after, the soldiers followed their own footsteps as the dead are buried in a shallow, unmarked mass grave like the thousands before them. Everything I've done without a care, so long as I could selfishly protect those I care for the most, so I wouldn't know the pain of having to lose them. Not unlike you, Adele. You lost your father, you were abandoned by your mother, you were estranged from your own sister. I didn't want to know how much it truly hurt you, but I still know. Every time I look in your eyes, you'll never forget it. You'll never forget the pain. Pain. Something I share vicariously through an accursed sixth sense. I only want to protect you, Adele. I hope you can forgive me for my sins." Adele stopped walking backwards and sighed. "You're not a sinner," she said. "Your motives are pure, but you let them cloud your judgment, Raziel." Raziel started to walk towards Adele again, and this time she did not back off and turn. "I should be able to say I'm grateful for you selflessly trying to protect me," continued Adele. "Even though I don't share your flesh nor your blood." "You know it as well as I do," said Raziel. "Family's not about the blood that flows in your veins, it's about those who care for you the most. My mother told me that before she left. She must be a wise woman. I hope I can meet her one day." "You will. I promise you, I'll let you meet her. Someday when this world is not supported by death and misery, we can all be together again to lead a normal life. As normal as it can be. Don't forget, you're an immortal race, doomed to live forever until you're laid to rest by sorcerers working the cold steel." Raziel turned his back to Adele again. He crossed his arms and stared up at the sky. "I'm not afraid to keep on living, but to tell you the truth, I am afraid to walk this world alone." Raziel then turned back to Adele. "Call it strange, but as an undead killing machine I'm supposed to lust for the end of the world. Death and destruction are supposed to be the essence of my existence, but I'm a monster with a heart that causes me such a moral conflict that gives me a headache. Some days I wish I could be a normal human child, carefree and innocent, ready to live life to its fullest. I know what that's like, whispered Adele to herself. Oh, nothing. Adele turned around and sat on the edge of the roof, dangling her legs over the side. To tell the truth, I have no idea what I was doing back there, taking on the elites like that. Guess it was as John said, got to take a stand and our own chances. Though, now that I think about it, I should have said something first. At least that way Fang or Dante could have at least come with me. Not only are they the fastest out of everyone, Fang could have carried me in safety with his inhuman strength and speed, and Dante's master of deception and trickery would have killed all them elites before they got to me. Well, then again, I wouldn't judge you for taking a leap of faith like that. Turned out pretty well, so don't worry about it. Yeah, well, it's not just all that. Adele dropped down from the roof and began walking, and Raziel quickly followed after her. What do you mean? He asked. I mean, I should thank you for everything. Taking me into your home, caring for me like I'm your little sister, always being there when I needed you the most. It's just what I do. Adele stopped walking and began to stammer as she turned back to Raziel. Are you okay? He asked. Yeah, I just don't know how to say it. Say what? Adele walked up to Raziel and kissed him on the lips, much to his surprise. Then she whispered in his ear, to say that I think I love you, Raziel. An eternity seemed to pass. Eventually, Raziel gently pushed Adele aside. Feeling embarrassed and rejected, she turned around to apologize, only to realize that an entire platoon of soldiers, complete with a tank, had managed to ambush the pair. There's the troublesome bitch, said the leading elite, almost oblivious to Raziel's presence. Get up! Raziel gave off an evil glare. You shall not touch her, he said. Worthless sack of shit! What are you going to do, boy? The elite pointed a staff of sorts at Raziel. That's all you are, a boy. And your little girl there, she's dead meat. Stripped down, cut up, thrown to the hounds. Raziel's right eye began to twitch. His fangs began to grow back to their monstrous length. His fists whitened at the grip he held on his blades. If you really value her that much, I swear she won't suffer. Until I get the hacksaw out. The elite began to laugh at his own cruelty, and at that point Raziel could not contain his rage anymore. From within the layers of cloth, the obsidian pendant around his neck glowed with a vibrant black light that almost completely engulfed him. Black flames and lightning shot out from the glow, and it pierced solid material such as steel and concrete within its radiance. You shall not fucking touch her. The only thing you shall have is oblivion! Raziel began to shout loudly with a demonic growl. He's trying to make a move, shouted the elite. Blast him! Everything opened fire, and the flash of the explosions drowned out Raziel's glow and threw Adele to the ground. When the smoke had cleared, Raziel had vanished, and the elite was standing over Adele, gloating. Dark clouds began to gather, bringing a heavy downpour with them. Lightning constantly ripped the sky in two, and as the elite was about to spear Adele with his staff, dark, mystic words echoed throughout the land, but the source of the voice could not be found. The sun sets. The shadows gather. The light flickers. The fires burn out. The undead and demons roam free. The blackest night begins. Disturbing music chills one's spine. The time has come. As these words rang out, the clouds gathered so densely that everything became pitch black. Nobody could see a thing. One soldier had headlamps on his helmet and he tried to turn them on, but the lights died almost instantly, as if all light was absorbed by the oncoming darkness. Suddenly, lightning flashed. The silhouette of a sinister and atrocious being could barely be seen, as a black fog blanketed the ground. Lightning flashed again. Even the elite was beginning to shake as the figure had moved closer, yet it appeared to have made no movement whatsoever. One more flash of lightning, and the fog slightly lifted, as if the figure was absorbing it. Everyone was now able to see slightly in the darkness. The figure appeared to lift a spear up into the air, at which point it threw the spear into the air. The spear pierced the cloud cover, causing it to turn in on itself as if a black hole was drawing the clouds in. A larger hole appeared in the clouds, which continued to rotate like the eye of the storm. The moon rose overhead, stained red as blood, appearing over 20 times larger in the sky than what it normally did. The spear seemed to travel all the way up to the moon, as a loud noise that appeared to be a combination of a sword slash and rock cracking echoed. A large black mark began to spread out on the moon's surface where the spear hit, giving it the appearance of a giant bloodshot eye looming over the area. From the center of the eye shot out an astral beam that hit the ground. Into the light, as its footfalls made black sparks of lightning that chimed like a morning bell, rode an 8-legged blackish-purple horse with a tail of shadow fire and a mane of ebony blades. 2 tusks sprouted from its obsidian helmet, which barely hid crimson eyes and a nose that breathed black mist. Atop this demon horse was a ghostly apparition of a knight who wore a Spartan-style helm, fashioned to have curved blades for horns, and straight blades like the ears of an elf on either side. The knight also wore ragged chainmail armor, heavy black gauntlets, and a cape with a design that could only have been thought of by an arcane sorcerer, as mystic runes covered the cloth, sewn of an abyssal material. 2 wings of blood-stained bone sprouted from the knight's back and flapped in tune with the morning bell that sounded with the footfalls of his steed. In his hand he held a wondrously plain broadsword, shaped with the curve of a katana, only the bladed edge was on the inside curve, as if he were a reaper with a scythe for a hand. Along the face of the blade, etched in a forgotten script, was the name Zantetsuken, Mark of the Redeemer. The knight raised his free arm into the air, and a few seconds later the spear fell from the sky and impaled the elite, who was immediately incinerated in a burst of black flame. The knight retrieved his spear, which was short, but of an elegant design so beautiful that the thought of using it for battle and sullying its image would drive a grown man to tears. Along its shaft was the name Gungnir, Mark of the Condemner. The knight then fixed the spear onto a steed's helm, transforming its image into that of a demonic unicorn. The horse then brayed as it stood up on its 2 backmost legs. The gap in the clouds quickly closed, plunging the battlefield back into darkness. The sickening sounds of flesh being torn apart and the screams of the doomed men pierced through the spines of all within earshot. Suddenly, the clouds, the rain, and the darkness all vanished into smoke, revealing that the soldiers were all frozen in place. Their helmets shattered to reveal that their faces were distorted and twisted into visages of terror in its purest incarnation. Adele, who was still laying on the ground, but holding herself up with her arms, watched fearfully as the knight turned away from the soldiers and began trotting away, giving her absolutely no attention apart from a familiar demonic gaze from piercing red eyes through the eye slits in the knight's helmet. The knight held Zantetsuken up to his face, with the blade facing to his left. Then he proceeded to run his forefinger slowly along the edge from the tip towards the hilt. The instant he touched the hilt, the standing soldiers began to fall apart into a grim sight, as the fallen elite had described he would have done to Adele had the knight not intervened. Sheathing the sword by stabbing it through its own heart, the knight and his horse slowly dissipated into evanescent mist, eventually revealing Raziel in the knight's place. Adele quickly stood up and ran to Raziel's side as he collapsed to the ground, unconscious, small streams of smoke emitting from his body. Adele turned to see that the rest of the Necros had finally caught up, their faces full of shock as if they had witnessed everything. The only words came from Raziel as his eyes fluttered into a cold, icy stare. Where am I? And that was chapter 9. Now, before I say anything about this chapter, to anybody who thinks I'm ripping off Twilight with the little love scene can fuck off, because I hate Twilight. It ruined vampires for everybody. I began writing the original concepts for Hell's Crusade before Twilight even came out, so I'm not making Raziel a sparkly pixie, that's just wrong. In fact, if you look into the ancient textbooks, when vampire myths began to originate, the returned corpses were not in any way, shape or form physically attractive, which is why Raziel has a shriveled, weak and monstrous rapidly aged body, so I guess even Dracula's getting kicked in the balls there. Now, pissing off dedicated fangirls aside, some details on Cyberfang's past have been revealed. Apparently his parents were the alpha male and female of his tribe, which in werewolf culture would make him equivalent to a prince. If you actually paid attention to Bob's statement about them being the kings and queens. I thought of this little detail from surprise, Final Fantasy. FF fans take note, as in most games there is at least one main playable character who is a person of extremely high rank in society, usually royalty in some form, and minor spoilers, the characters that prove my point are number 4 is Edward, who is a prince, and Cecil and Rosa, who become king and queen at the end of the game, as well as their son Theodore in the sequel Final Fantasy XL After Years. Next you have Final Fantasy V's Lena and Faris, who are princesses, 9's Garnet, who is a princess turned queen, 10's Seymour, who technically is only playable for one battle, who is a maester and a summoner, and 12's Ash, who, like Garnet, is a princess turned queen, as well as Larsa, who is a guest character and heir to the Arcadian Empire. Now, most of you will be expecting some explanation of what Raziel just did to protect Adele, but I'll elaborate more in the next chapter, because it's explained as a plot device. So yeah, you're just gonna have to wait. Musical credits. As the Necros began marching through a school, Alice Madness Returns Combat Theme returns once again. During John, Luke and Cyberfang's little scene, it doles out to Devil's Ambition from Final Fantasy IX. But combat theme resumes in time for Raziel's rescue scene. Afterwards, while he talks to Adele on the roof of the school, the theme of Julia plays from Final Fantasy VIII, and after Adele confesses her feelings for Raziel, it fades into the song Eyes on Me, which is from the same game. Warning, there is a spoiler alert ahead, a big one. Mute the audio now if you wish, and wait for the end spoilers alert. Now, the song Eyes on Me has a symbolic tie to the characters' designs for Raziel and Adele, having been inspired by Squall and Renoa from Final Fantasy VIII. So you fans would have seen this coming anyway. In the world of Final Fantasy VIII, a woman called Julia writes the song Eyes on Me about a Galbadian soldier called Laguna, who was in love with her, but he had to leave to go on a mission and he never returned. After some time, Julia married General Caraway and they had a daughter, Renoa. Meanwhile, Laguna wound up in Windhill and fell in love with a woman called Rain, and they also had a child, Squall. Coincidences aside, the song Eyes on Me is featured several times in Final Fantasy VIII, not only as the game's own theme song, but is used as the love theme between Squall and Renoa, hence why I used it for Raziel and Adele. End spoiler alert. Now, after that little scene, when the soldiers threaten to kill Adele and Raziel summons the mysterious dark entity that cuts them down, Beyond the Wasteland from Final Fantasy Advent Children plays, which you may remember from Chapter 7, during the scene of all the little Nemesis zombies up Gormy Hill. Now, since everything else is going to be explained for you in the next chapter, I'll just leave it at that. So, next time on Hell's Crusade, Raziel explains how he summoned the Dark Horseman and the ancient forces behind it. The Necros head into the Dark Chamber underneath the Warden's office and find a dark horror of the Abyss, as well as a darker, fouler secret. If you enjoyed the Necrosis Chronicles thus far, leave a like and or subscribe for new chapters. Be sure to check out my like page on Facebook. I'm updating the page weekly with information on the series, especially characters, locations and concepts that went into the design. Although it's mostly stuff that I'm already covering in these little info bits at the end of the chapter. Anyway, if you like the Facebook page, you'll also be updated as I will leave links to new chapters as they come out. So, shameless promotion aside, this is Necroarcanist XIII in association with BANDIT1569, signing off. Stay classy, YouTube.